Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought what we would do is another video recapping 2024 for War Thunder, and one of the things that happened this year was, of course, events. They changed the event structure quite aggressively this year, and overall I would say for the better. But this meant that we had more events to go through, more vehicles around the place, and also more stuff to generally focus on throughout the year, which I know in general is not great for everybody, but at least for me I think it worked pretty well. So in this video we're going to go through all of the vehicles that were added in these different events, and also what was available for these events, and also just general thoughts of what War Thunder should do going forward in terms of these types of events. As always, if you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe. Let's get started. So in the past, the way that events used to work is you'd have blocks of events. You'd have the summer event, which usually came around in July and August. You had the winter event, which was December, January, and then you had two kind of crafting events, which would come around in February or March, or something like September or October time. And each of these events had 4 vehicles in them, and usually these events were very much cram time, and also with the crafting events it was pretty much impossible to get all of the vehicles in them. This year they completely switched it up, where most of the events that were available were individual events during the year. So you had events which were specifically designed for one vehicle and one vehicle only, therefore you could pick and choose which events that you wanted and what you wanted to grind. Generally, I think this is a much more positive system than what we had previously, because first of all, in this year, you could actually grind out all the event vehicles without having to use the market or without having to use anything else, because they removed the crafting events. I think the crafting events in general have a place in the game, but not how they were implemented in previous years. So with this kind of individual setup this year, we actually got exactly the same amount of vehicles that you would have from the standard amount of events from previous years, but they were just split up more. So this year you had 13 separate events, and only one of them had multiple amounts of vehicles, which was the Winter Tales event, which has 4 of them. So you had 12 individual events, which spanned from January all the way into December, and then of course you have the Winter Tales at the end, which has the 4 vehicles over the festive period. So for me, when I look at this, this is the same amount of vehicles that you would have got in previous years, where you would have 16 from those blocks of 4 events. Now you have them spread out across the year, and also you are able to grind all of them out. They also kind of changed the way that you grind the events. Most of them are just based on mission score, so you just have to get mission score in specific modes, and depending on the kind of use of the vehicle, or depending on how high tier the vehicle was, the amount of mission score you needed every few days was increased. So these style of events, there are more of them, they happen more often, but at the same time, you get to choose which ones that you want to do, which vehicles you want to grind out, and also the vast majority of them actually had coupons attached to them, which means that if you don't want them, you can trade them in for something else, or you can sell them or get war bonds out of them, which I think is generally quite good. One of the negatives of this new system is the fact that the events themselves are a little bit harder to do. But if you are just focusing on these events and nothing really else, then generally that means that it's a little bit better for you because of the fact that you can just kind of grind on that, and you don't have to worry about the other game modes which you would have to do in the other events. So for some people this system is going to be worse because they're more like seasonal gamers, but for me personally, since I play a decent amount all the time, this was a better system, and it also meant that I actually grinded more of the game out in different areas because of it. So generally I prefer this system. I think it's a better system, and we actually got the same amount of rewards that we did in previous years in this year, so we didn't lose anything in terms of rewards or in terms of events. We even got the kind of Mad Max style event as well for the April Fool's one, which was still around too, which we'll talk about later. The first event of this new system actually came around on the 25th of January, and it was the Call of the Dragon event, which the Object 292 turned up in. The 292 is a fantastic event vehicle, which is why on the market it's pretty expensive. It's basically a T80, which has access to a 152mm smoothbore gun. Now, my only issue with this vehicle is I honestly think it should have been a tech tree vehicle. I know that there are other options for the tech tree that, you could get these things in, but unfortunately we haven't got any yet, and that just kind of makes me sad. The event itself wasn't too bad, and also it had a loading screen in it, which in general is quite nice, and also some nice decorations and decals to go along with it. It was also a good way of stamping kind of the new system down and showing how these things were going to work, where it was going to be 8 stages, 45,000 mission score every 2 days, and also you get a pretty decent tank at the end of it. At the end of the day, this one also performed incredibly well, having to go up in BR a few times, and still is pretty good to this day, even after all of the changes to the meta that went around. The next one was the Jaguar IS event, which basically started straight after the 292 one. This was the Jaguar IS, which came in for Great Britain, which gave them access to another very powerful Jaguar. This is the Indian Jaguar, and one of the things that is really interesting about India in War Thunder, and also Pakistan in War Thunder, they were massively expanded over the last few years in the British tech tree and also in the Chinese tech tree. And the IS was just a continuation of this. It was another 45,000 mission score event, which led people to believe that this was going to be the standard, even though they'd said previously that 35 to 45,000 was kind of the way to go, so there were going to be lower ones in the future. The Jaguar IS came in with Magic 2s, which were obviously very powerful, came in with guided munitions and also countermeasures, and a very good RWR. And also, at the same time, this was an event which wasn't too hard to grind out, because before this they'd actually allowed a simulator to grind these events, and they'd also in this one added some new mechanics when it came to the stages of it. This is where we started to see some changes in terms of these events and how they were going to work. So number one, if you actually did the additional stage of this event, because it was 9 stages and not 8, what you would get access to is 4 random modifications for the Jaguar IS. A lot of people have been asking for the long time, because a lot of these vehicles are event vehicles, not premiums, which are high tier event vehicles, that grinding them out was really hard to do. Because you're basically being thrust into a meta where a lot of people are going to be playing them, they're going to be playing them stock, and they're not going to have access to any of the good missiles or good weaponry, which makes them their BR. So with that 4 random modifications, it just made it a little bit easier to go through. I would prefer it if it wasn't random and you could pick what you wanted, but unfortunately that was never going to happen. Then they also added in another system, which was the discounts on purchasing stages using Golden Eagles. So if you got to a certain percentage of the stage, the actual GE amount that you would have to pay if you wanted to complete it would be halved, and then if you went even further, it would be reduced by 80%. So this is something that, once again, people had been asking for a long time, because people would get really close to finishing it and then not get over the finish line because they ran out of time or whatever. So from the 292 event, which was like kind of the standard event, we had some improvements in the Jaguar IS event, and this is where the new system started really taking off and people really started enjoying it. We also then had the first naval event, and the naval events, I'd say, were pretty weak this year. A lot of them were just copy-paste of what we saw in the trees already. It was the SMS Baden in the Imperial Flagship event. This one did add a Kaiserlich Marine ship flag, which was pretty cool. One of the unique things about these events for naval is you would get a kind of cool flag from it, and also, once again, it was a 45,000 mission score event, because this vehicle is a top tier naval vehicle. Now, naval events are a little bit easier to be able to grind out, so it wasn't too bad, but generally it was something which I know put a lot of people off, because once again it was 3 45Ks in a row and people were wondering what is going on with this. So with the Imperial Flagship event, you know, you got some decals, you didn't get a loading screen, you didn't really get anything new from this event apart from the ship flag, and the Baden itself was just kind of dull because it's something that we've seen before. And then you had another ground event, and this is something that they tried to do through the year. So you'd have a air, a ground, and a naval event. So they were trying to keep it the same across the board. This only changed in the middle when they decided to add the Centurion. But the next ground event was the Inferno Cannon one for the PLZ 83-130. This one started off on the 18th of April, or at least it was announced on the 18th of April. It actually started on the 24th of April, since it was after the April Fool's event, which had turned up the Mad Max event. And this one went back to kind of standard. You know, you had access to some decals, some decorations, but it was the first event where you had to only grind 35,000 mission score for this vehicle, which made it obviously a lot easier, especially since it was a rank 5 vehicle. The only issue with this event is it wasn't a premium once again. It was an event vehicle instead. I feel like they could have got away with this one being an event vehicle, especially since they went away from giving this thing the random modifications, probably because it was a lot lower in ranks, therefore it was seen as easier to be able to grind out. But at the same time, it did give you a cool anti-tank rocket launcher decoration, and as I said, a bit easier to do. The vehicle itself is a fun donkey vehicle, very similar to a bunch of others that are in the Chinese tech tree. I just wish it had been a premium, because it would have helped people kind of grind out the tech tree. After this, you had kind of a string of events that were more World War II focused, because of course in May and June you have some pretty important events. You have the Legend of Victory stuff, which Gaijin really likes doing. Stuff like the World War II Chronicles was where these types of ideas started, and then also you have D-Day, and D-Day is one of those things where there's a lot of really unique and iconic vehicles that you can kind of put in for D-Day, which a lot of people are interested in. So the Legend of Victory event was for Eramin's Yak 3. This one started on the 8th of May and went to the 20th, and this was the first premium event vehicle of the year, and it was a rank 3 USSR Yak 3. This one is slightly different from the standard Yak 3 that we have in the tech tree. I can't entirely remember what the difference is. It might be a difference in a machine gun, or it might be a difference in the way that the kind of cupola is, but generally it's basically the same. And it was another 35,000 mission score event, which was quite nice. The most interesting thing about this event was the fact that they added the travel gramophone decoration in. And if you don't know about that decoration, what it actually does is it plays music. So if you put it on your vehicle, on your ground vehicles in the game, you can actually hear the music that it plays, which is really, really cool. And I do like these interactive decorations that they've added over time. Since this was a premium, you didn't get the free modifications, and also it gave you a vehicle which was going to be pretty good in grinding through the tech tree, and at the same time being 35k was a lot easier to do for people. This one was a good event vehicle in my opinion, since, you know, those areas of the USSR can be a little bit rough. D-Day, of course, got its own event, and also it kind of broke the trend of what was going on for the rest of the year. This is where the events got a little bit skew with. So previously, we'd had tank, air, and then naval, and that was going to be kind of the layer of it. So then we had tank, air, and then this one was going to be naval, but they actually made a blog post saying that it wasn't going to be naval because of the fact that they wanted to do this specific vehicle. And you can't blame them. For D-Day, or the 5th of June, which is when this event started, you had the Churchill Avery, which is of course the Donkey Churchill. This was a premium heavy tank that was added to Britain at rank 2, and I think it's fair to say this is more of a collector's item than anything else. The actual range of this gun is incredibly short, and even though whatever it hits it will destroy, it has a long reload and also a bunch of other issues. Now for me, this vehicle is very much kind of like a hangar decoration, but I've seen people actually use it to quite a lot of effect, which is quite fun, and also at the same time, it's just one of those that is very iconic. And once again, that was kind of a theme of War Thunder this year. They were okay with adding vehicles that just didn't really fit in the game. That's why you got stuff like the Churchill. That's why you got stuff like the F-117, for example. They were different, they were wonky, they were weird, and I think the game really benefited from them. The only issue I had with this event is there wasn't anything special in it. There wasn't any loading screen that you could get. I thought it would be really nice to get a loading screen for this event, and it was 35,000 mission points, so it wasn't that hard to grind out, and you did get the flying dustbin decoration, which was quite nice, but I feel like they could have added a little bit extra to this, maybe like a camouflage, or once again a loading screen or something like that, would have been really nice for this vehicle. But instead, they kept it short, they kept it sweet, they kept it standard. And then we went back to standard, the Alcione, which was part of the Flight of the Albatross event, which was another naval vehicle. This was an Italian gunboat at rank 5, which was very similar to other vehicles that we've already had in the Italian tech tree. It was a 35,000 mission point one, which is kind of surprising since this is an event vehicle at the highest rank of naval, at least in coastal, and it went from July to August. So during the time of the usual summer event, you actually had this one. Now, it did have a cool flag, the Italy Naval Jack. It was 35k to grind out. I actually ended up getting the coupon on this one because, you know, it was quite easy to grind. But generally, the event was very much unforgettable, and I think they kind of mistimed it a little bit, since, of course, it was one which was going through the summer period and was kind of, it felt like it was just didn't really fit in the general scheme of things. But it did mean that they were back to standard, doing the ground, air, and naval one, which is what they wanted to do. And then you had the actual summer event, which people were looking forward to. So during the Alcione event, what I was hearing constantly is, where is the summer event? Where is it? Because, you know, obviously people are used to the 4-vehicle format, and we had to keep going through the idea that that wasn't happening anymore. But guess what? They did do a banger summer event, and this was, of course, for the Persian Tomcat, the Iranian F-14A IRIAF, which is a fantastic vehicle. You know, it's basically just a better version of the standard F-14 that was in the game at the time, and it went from the 8th of August to the 26th. It was another event vehicle for the US, and it was a rank 8 jet fighter. It also came along with a really cool profile picture and also some fun decals, and once again they actually gave it a camouflage as well, which was really cool. So that is something which was missing out from a lot of these different ones. They also added in the silver chest to this event, because obviously it ran alongside generally where the summer event was, so they did a silver lions chest, which I know had a lot of people happy. They also brought back the 4 random modifications, which of course helped people grind these things out, and also the unique camouflage for the vehicle. The only thing they didn't add into this event, which was kind of sad, was they didn't add a loading screen, which I think would be really nice for this. Hopefully in the future we can see some loading screens for vehicles like this. But yeah, the Persian Tomcat, or the Iranian F-14, is and was incredibly powerful. It's basically a machine which has access to its own types of missiles, and kind of dominated the air for a long time, and meant that Gaijin had to forcibly do a very, very aggressive BR change to actually help a lot of vehicles that were getting dominated by it during these events later on, and kind of was a catalyst for the F-14s to go up in BR because this thing was so powerful. So it very much did kind of break the meta, and I'm still sure today it does really well with its active radar homing missiles. Then you had the Barham, the HMS Barham, which was another battleship event for this year, rank 6, and another event vehicle. Nothing really different comparing this one to, of course, the Baden event. Basically, it was the same, apart from you got a cool profile picture instead of a flag, and it was a 45k mission score event once again. You did actually get a unique camouflage from this event, which I think was actually really cool. One of the things I was a bit worried about was that they weren't going to do that, because, you know, usually they don't for naval, and unfortunately this was just another vehicle which was pretty much the same as another one that came in a little bit later, or even a bit before it. The only cool one about this is the Per and Fur decal, in my opinion, which basically paints a homage to some of the animals that used to be on these vehicles, and there's a really cool cat story which always goes around when it comes to the Royal Navy. I highly recommend reading about it. I'm sure if you just type in Royal Navy Cat on Google, you will find out about it. But yeah, there was nothing wrong with the Barham event. It was generally fine. It was just nothing special, which is kind of a problem with a lot of the naval events this year. They've all basically been the same, where they've just been copy-paste of vehicles that have turned up, or just vehicles that don't really inspire interest. The Boxer MGS then turned up in October. This one was the Mobile Sniper event, and the Boxer came for a very powerful country, Germany of course, and it came in at rank 7, and generally followed the kind of style of what a lot of ground vehicles did this year, which was large, light vehicles with either heavy firepower or auto cannons. This thing has the 105mm on the cockerel turret with the really nice autoloader, has access to very good weaponry, had access to a very nice camo, but it also wasn't a vehicle that people enjoyed that much because it has absolutely no survivability. And this is something which for an event vehicle is kind of a killer, which is why a lot of event vehicles that do well are ones which actually have access to a bit of survivability. So, kind of sucks that this one didn't. It was a banger of an event though. You had decorations, you had decals, you had a unique camo, you got the 4 random modifications, and also it was once again a 45,000 mission score event, which was basically all of the events this year, showing that there wasn't a huge difference or variety between them. That was one of the issues that this year had, where even though you had this kind of range of kind of mission scores, most of them, because most of the vehicles were high-tier event vehicles, were 45k, which kind of sucked. Hopefully next year we'll have some more middling ones, so therefore we don't have the issue of constantly having to deal with, you know, very, very aggressive high mission point award matches. Gaijin also every year do a Dreams Come True events. This is usually around an iconic, weird World War II vehicle, and this year was no different. You had the KV-7, which was from the 1st November until the 13th of November. For the 12th anniversary, the KV-7 came in, which is just a weird donkey vehicle. You know, you had the 76mm and 245s, and it's just one which is a bit of fun and kind of enjoyable. They also, alongside of it, gave a pretty cool decoration, which was the 3-barreled experimental assault rifle. There was also some fun decals alongside of it, and also it wasn't really that long of an event. The event itself was also 35k, also was a premium vehicle, so you didn't have to worry about grinding it. And then also you had the event after it, which I think was poorly implemented. This was the one where you could get access to the IS-7, but basically you had to go into an event, you had to grind out tickets with, you know, KV-7 versus KV-7 gameplay in arcade, and if you got the tickets, you got a chance to go into a raffle for an IS-7. But there was hundreds of thousands of tickets which people got, and they only gave away 12 IS-7s. So completely worthless at the end of the day when it comes to the actual thing. And after, you know, people talking about how they designed it and how they thought about it, hopefully that design never comes back again, because it was very negative and once again just causes aggression and negativity, which is not what you want out of these things. You want positivity, you want people to be happy, but that's not what happened with any of these things. So hopefully that can change going forward. The event itself though, the standard event, the Dreams Come True event, was fine. It worked incredibly well, and hopefully people can have a good time with the vehicle in the future. Then we had the Flight of the Vulture event, which was the IAR-93B. It was actually really cool to see this vehicle because it's one of the first Romanian jets that we have in the game. And it also means that maybe we'll see some more Romanian stuff or even some Yugoslavian stuff which could turn up. The event went from the 27th of November until the 11th. It was another one of these 35,000 mission score events, which was kind of surprising since this thing is quite a high rank. It looks like they realized that the 45Ks of the earlier ranks were probably not the way to do this. So it's a rank 6 event vehicle. It does have access to some pretty nice ordnance in the form of air-to-air, and it's just at a weird BR right now, which of course a lot of vehicles are around that area, but at least it does better than other things. One of the cool things about this event is the loading screens. The loading screens look really nice, and also at the same time you got some decal rewards alongside of it, which in general was quite good too. The event itself was quite easy, and hopefully it will give people a little bit more of a boost to get into the Italian tech tree, which is one of those areas which I feel is still underappreciated in War Thunder. And then, of course, you have the Winter Tales event, which is going on right now. Return to tradition with 4 vehicles that are on offer, and 3 of them basically being top tier vehicles. The TheEuropeanCanadian, the Kafir C10, and also the Kirishima, which is a copy of 2 other machines that we have. And then also the MB151, which is just a little bit of a fun machine, and, you know, can kind of rock around in arcade or ground. Just wish it was rank 2 instead of rank 1. So this one is just a return to tradition event. You know, it's very similar to what we've seen before. You have the coupon decals, you have the profile picture, you have the decorations, and then also have the unique camouflages. This is the standard event that you would have in the summer or the winter area. So this is actually a great way of working out if people like the new system of the individual events or if they prefer these types of events. Now for me, I prefer the individual ones just because they're easier to go, they're easier to focus, but I'm sure other people will prefer these since they prefer like block playing instead of others. So when I look at this event, you know, it really made me realize how much I enjoyed the new system compared to the other ones. Just instead of having constant pressure of trying to grind out each of the different game modes over a 2-day period, especially over the festive period, being able to focus on one, even if it was a little bit more expensive, was so much better for the general soul. The new unique event that they did this year was Mad Thunder, and this was obviously a take on Mad Max, where you had to collect resources, and when you collected the resources, you also were able to get a bunch of decals, decorations, a ship flag, and also a profile icon. Generally, I thought this event was okay by the end. It started off really poorly because it is basically just an extraction game mode, and extraction game modes are awful when it comes to at least what I prefer in video games. I know a lot of people enjoy them because, you know, the risk reward of it, but for me, I just found it very dull in terms of what you kind of had to do. You also had 2 separate systems working against each other. You had the one where you had to collect resources, and the other one where you had to collect rage. And the rage one you basically got from destroying vehicles or going near destroyed vehicles if they had the rage token, and I thought that was kind of fun. And then also you had access to collecting resources to escape with them. Now that part was just impossible because of the fact that if you died, you lost all your resources. They actually changed this after a few days, where you still gained half of the resources even if you died. So this made it a lot easier to grind through. The reason they made these changes is because so many people were struggling with getting it done, and I can't blame them because it was super rough to do. So for me, I thought in general this event by the end was very fun, and I want to see them actually add in the rage system in different places, and also the map itself was kind of interesting. I don't think it would work as a standard War Thunder map, but it was kind of fun, especially with the environmental effects that were brought in. The vehicles themselves were really cool. I think in general they looked awesome, and also at the same time the actual extraction idea was pretty well implemented, even though I don't enjoy that type of gameplay. I think it promotes some pretty negative stuff. But as I've said, I know a lot of people who like stuff like that. Obviously Tarkov is set up like that, and many others are, and that is kind of the thing that people are interested in. The whole, ooh, what if I can get away with this, and oh, I feel great, but I forget about the 99% of the time where I get hammered. So the event system this year, I would say, was better than previous years, but that's just because for me, it fits me better. As somebody who generally plays War Thunder a lot, and also plays it during the year instead of seasonally, like a few people, it fit what I wanted to do. but also at the same time, what people could do is pick and choose what they wanted to grind here, which I generally think is quite important. There was a lot of areas where, you know, if you didn't want to do an event, you didn't have to, kind of like the whole idea of the battle pass. Whereas if they lumped all these vehicles together, you usually had to do the event in order to get one of them and not get the other ones. So this year gave people a lot more choice in terms of what they wanted to play and what they wanted to do, but also had way more events on offer across the board, meaning that keeping up with them was a little bit tougher to do to work out what was kind of going on. The fact that there was more vehicles which had coupons as well, and those coupons were technically easier to grind. I know that sounds a bit weird, but they were, which is why a lot of the prices on the gadget market have dropped for a lot of these vehicles. And also, it meant that there was a lot more conversation around individual vehicles that wouldn't have happened if this stuff didn't happen. Because what ends up happening a lot in the winter seasons or the summer event seasons is you have a lot of focus on like one of the vehicles. Is this one going to be good? What's the price of this one? Whereas the other ones completely get forgotten. Whereas in this setup, this means that everything is focused on and gets its little piece of the limelight, which I think is super important, and hopefully they can do that kind of going forward. We didn't get any really repeat events this year. Usually they kind of bring back one, whether it's like Tailspin or another one, but this year it was more just the standard event season. It would be nice to see some replays of stuff with a few different changes next year, but I honestly feel like if they repeated this system, it would be better going forward. You got the same amount of stuff this year compared to previous years. The only difference was it was over more events, so therefore it was easier to track and also picking what you wanted to do. So this year gets a big plus from me, and I hope in the future they continue this trend. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.